Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? All right, NFL trade deadline has come and gone. The Saints were, in fact, sellers. Marshon Lattimore traded to the Washington Commanders for a team that is typically has a history of buying at the deadline. Certainly signals a new day, a new era for the New Orleans Saints. Ross Jackson, our guy, the host of the Locked On Saints podcast. Of course, our lead writer over at LouisianaSports.net, covering all things black and gold. Good enough to join us. Ross, how are you, man?
Hey, buddy, doing great. Glad to be here with you on what's been, I guess, a pretty busy couple of days.
Yeah, man. Well, no kidding, right? I mean, you fired Dennis Allen, and then you trade Marshon Lattimore. I mean, it's pretty clear, Ross, this is an indicator that they're moving on. What was your reaction of them actually getting a deal done for Marshon Lattimore today?
Yeah, I think you kind of got a little bit of a viewpoint of it, but throughout the process of the day, you can kind of tell that this is moving closer and closer and closer and closer, and we're hearing more and more kind of every minute or so that, like, yeah, this team's in, now this team's in, this is getting a little closer, this is actually getting close to happening, and then finally the news breaks with the trade happening with the Washington Commanders. Several teams also involved in addition to that. I think that the reaction kind of got angled on less than surprising because of how much noise has been around this potential move. Not just over the course of the past couple of weeks, Matt, but even if you go back to the offseason when there was all that conversation about the fractured relationship between Marshon Lattimore and the Saints organization, there was conversation about whether or not the team should trade him then. Then they kind of patched that up and then, kind of get things going this season. And then ironically, after Dennis Allen gets fired, they still trade him away. And so I think that the next piece about this is kind of what you just alluded to, is that the next piece of the reaction is, hey, this is the Saints embracing where they are, which is in the process of staring down a rebuild and adding draft assets to help them get a little bit younger as a team right now. There's 9 players over the course, over the age of 30 years old, which in NFL terms is a pretty old weighted team. And so this team wants to get younger. They help themselves do that, trading Marshon away and bringing in some more draft capital.
What other teams do we know that were in play?
My understanding is that the Los Angeles Chargers got involved, that the Kansas City Chiefs were in there. I heard that the Baltimore Ravens were sniffing around as well. You saw that they actually ended up, after the Marshon Lattimore trade, they traded with the Los Angeles Rams to bring in Tre'Davious White. So maybe that confirms at least their interest at the position. They wanted another elite corner to, or at least elite level, elite talent corner to pair with Marlon Humphrey or help around Marlon Humphrey. And so those are 3 of the teams that I heard were involved. I think that there was a little bit of a whisper, very quiet rumbling, that maybe the Green Bay Packers would get involved, but I don't have any confirmation yet that they actually did.
So why was Washington the team that got it done?
I think it really came down to the return. I think there's 2 things here. I think the return is number 1, getting a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and then returning the 6th-round pick that they sent earlier this offseason to Washington for defensive tackle John Ridgway III. For Marshon and the Saints' 5th-round pick is a really good deal. What we expected the Saints to get in value was a day 2 pick, which is effectively what that 3rd-round pick is. But to also be able to advance your 5th-round pick, to also be able to get another day 3 pick in, I think that those are additional kind of lanyard moves, if you will, as a part of that. So this is an example of the Saints making a move, sending a player away, and actually getting a pretty good return off of it, which, if we're being honest, has not always been the case when the Saints are shipping off players. And so I think that ended up kind of being the thing. I think the other piece, too, is that there is a little bit of there's a lot of respect from the New Orleans Saints organization to Marshon Lattimore, and I think that sending him to a team where he was going to be able to compete like the Washington Commanders is a part of the equation, too. Not to say that the Kansas City Chiefs don't also fall under that category, but I think it was a perfect marriage of both of those things.
Interesting that you mentioned they would improve their 5th round. So my understanding, Ross, tell me where I'm wrong here. I'm assuming the Saints will have very high 5th round pick, and Washington, if they keep winning, will have a back of round 5 pick. So that pick swap would not benefit the Saints. What am I missing there?
I think the big thing is the massive addition of compensatory picks that will happen at the end of the 4th round. That 4th round gets longer and longer as those compensatory picks come in for teams. And so I think that the gap will widen between a high 5th round pick and a low 4th round pick once those compensatory picks come in. So instead of it being what would originally look like maybe let's call it a 6 or 7 pick move could turn into pretty quickly a 14 or 15 pick move.
Makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's talk a little bit about the money as well. Ross Jackson's with us. He's on Twitter at RossJacksonNola. Give him a follow. Of course, you read all of Ross's stuff at LouisianaSports.net. Make sure you're subscribed to the Locked On Saints podcast as well. Let's just talk about what this means short-term, long-term for the Saints with the cap situation moving Lattimore. Take it as you wish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think what you're looking at here is, in terms of the immediate savings, is about $400,000. Big whoop, right? Not a huge amount of money there.
This year.
Yeah, right, this year. So they're not going to save a ton of cap space, but what it's going to allow them to do is be a little bit more comfortable in terms of where they're moving, in terms of their future. Marshon Lattimore was due a $16 million base salary next year, plus a $2 million roster bonus. So it's about $18 million in total there. They would have had to restructure that, kick the can down the road more. Now they're off the hook from doing that. They don't save $16 or $18 million because a bunch of the bonuses from previous restructures all have to advance into next year's salary cap. So overall, once the savings from this year roll over to next year, you're talking about minimal savings, but you're keeping yourself from kicking the can down the road and spending more money out of 2025, 2026, and 2027, I think is the better way to kind of look at it.
What do we think is the long-term impact of this deal of moving Marshon Lattimore on the Saints?
Yeah, I think the long-term impact is that you lose a lockdown corner, right? Now you lose a lockdown corner that has had some, strange injuries, a lacerated kidney, got rolled up on, things like that. Not things that I would call injury-prone issues, but, it is worth mentioning that, they have lived life without Marshon Lattimore and have become very experienced with doing that. They have a very talented cornerback room. Marshon Lattimore, of course, was a part of it. He now is out for the season, or has been out for the season with a broken femur. But, you have a young guy in Alontae Taylor, who I think is one of the young pieces that this team should be keenly evaluating throughout the rest of the season, because he's one of those young pieces that you now have the ability to build your rebuild around. Same thing with second-round rookie Kool-Aid McKinstry, who can also be a part of that. So this opens the door for you to be able to kind of have that influx, that youth movement in your secondary, so that you can start to kind of build up your youth leaders or your new leaders in that position. Alontae Taylor is somebody that came into the NFL as a born and bred outside corner, got kind of shoehorned into the slot. Be very interested to see now with the departure of Dennis Allen if he moves to the outside, and with the departure of Marshon Lattimore if he moves to the outside, and has the ability to prove that little tattoo that he has behind his ear that says "I'm him." Does he get the opportunity to prove that, and does he make good on it? And I think that if you're able to do that, then this team can move forward with two pretty strong perimeter corners in he and Kool-Aid McKinstry, and that if you're able to kind of capture that development quickly, then you can focus on building up and seeing where you can tinker with the rest of the roster, or more than tinker, rebuild the rest of the roster.
By the way, there is a good piece up right now at LouisianaSports.net. Ross has been all over this, not only his reaction to Lattimore, but he has a nice piece up as well about Alontae Taylor and his role now as the future of the Saints at cornerback. It's really good. You can go read it at LouisianaSports.net. As always, everything at LouisianaSports.net is completely free, no paywalls, no article limits, anything like that, always free over at LouisianaSports.net. Ross, any other word if the Saints were shopping any other players today?
I haven't heard anything definitive that they were actively shopping. I have heard that there were phone calls being made about guys like Chase Young in particular, was somebody that apparently was being checked on. There were other players that were mentioned too, but I don't have enough solid to really kind of run with on that. But there are some phone calls being made to New Orleans. My understanding is that New Orleans was never really openly making calls and shopping. They were receiving phone calls, and they got the right deal offer from one team for one player, and that's the move that they made. I don't know that they were really kind of out there with a big for sale sign throughout the trade deadline here.
What from here to the remainder of the season, now that Dennis Allen's been fired, the trade deadline is passed, is there anything that you in particular are looking forward to over the next 10 weeks, 9 games from this team or from this franchise?
Yeah, I think the thing that you're looking forward to now is, what does the young talent on your team look like? And look, you're not going to have any choice but to showcase it if you're in New Orleans, right? If you are New Orleans. Marshon Lattimore is out for the season. Chris Olave, I'd be surprised if he takes another snap this season. Rashid Shaheed's out for the season. Marshon Lattimore gets traded. Will Harris right now is still on injured reserve. So all those players, all those positions now are filled with young players that are going to be coming back in. Guys like Mason Tipton, you get to have an actual look at him. A guy like Alontae Taylor, you finally get to see him potentially in his natural position. Same thing for Kool-Aid McKinstry when he comes back for his hamstring injury. Rico Payton maybe gets some additional opportunities as another undrafted free agent rookie cornerback. Jordan Howden as a second-year safety gets more looks. You get a real opportunity to look at the youth of this roster and begin to evaluate that. I think that's the thing that I'm looking forward to most over the course of the last 8 games for this team, is looking at getting a look at what that development looks like, what the future could look like for this team. And then you get an opportunity to kind of see an early interview for Darren Rizzi, who will probably get an interview for the Saints head coach. They interviewed him back in 2022. It's likely that they'll interview him again after the season unless somehow things just go completely off the rails under his watch, which I don't expect. And so you get a good look at that, too. I think the Saints will have an expansive coaching search, but I do believe that Darren Rizzi will be a part of it. So this is an opportunity to begin all those kind of evaluations, figure out where your team is and where your team heads after the season going into the offseason.
Say, man, I don't think Darren Rizzi can send this thing any more off the rails than it already is. I mean,
ain't that the truth?
Maybe the better way to say it is, can he not put it back on the rails?
Right. Yeah.
It remains derailed, potentially. You can read about it over at LouisianaSports.net. Of course, you can listen to Ross every day, Locked On Saints podcast, however you get your podcast, or on YouTube. All right, man, we appreciate it. Great work. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Take care. Stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.